Well, I'd like to say thank you to Evan and Phil and everyone in a red shirt. Thank you to the Lone Star Museum. What a great location, huh? This is an amazing event. I was at the Flight SimCon event in 2014, and my shirt, I don't know if you can read it, it says, flying, it's all about attitude. And I like the double meaning because being a pilot isn't simply controlling the pitch of the plane, it's also about what you bring in yourself. How many people here have their private pilot certificate? Nobody? How many are hoping to get theirs in the next couple of years? Great.
2 weeks from my check ride.
2 weeks from your check ride. That's great. How many came in because they were walking around and looking for some place that was air conditioned and wanted to sit down? And how many people? Well, I don't see anybody yet who came because I strong-armed them. So it doesn't matter why you're here. Thank you for coming, and to those online, thank you for attending as well. I appreciate that. This presentation is about my experience learning to fly in the real world. I never wanted to be an airline pilot or get paid for flying. I just wanted to prove to myself that I could do it. I wrote this book because I believe it's a fascinating story, not only for people interested in aviation, but for anyone who tries something new. I'm a lifelong aviation enthusiast, and I've had 2 kidney transplants, the second one in 2009. My book has no pictures, so coming here today, you get to see the pictures that would be in the book if I could have afforded to put those in. Also, I'm going to ask you to please hold any questions that you have till the end. When I was looking at turning 50, in 2013, I thought I would finally take the leap to try to get my pilot's license. For a sport pilot certificate, I was told it would take me about 18 months and cost me between $3,000 and $6,000. I know some of you were laughing, but I didn't know. I said, sign me up. It took me more than 6 years, 4 flight instructors, 3 different flight schools at 4 different airports, and a bucket load of money. At 60 hours, I still hadn't soloed. I never took a break from my pursuit, but I did have to ground myself at one point. This is my story. I worked in information technology for about 35 years. I retired as IT director in 2018. I was diagnosed with kidney disease in 1989 at the age of 29. I had renal failure in 1992. I received my first transplant in 1996. I received my second transplant in 2009, started my journey to become a pilot in 2013 at the age of 49. And I currently work as the interim executive director for the Massachusetts Air and Space Museum. So, everybody wants to know, what do I fly in my sim? I fly an A2A Cherokee 180 in P3D version 4.5. I have a Cytec Cessna yoke, throttle, and pedals. I use RealSim Gear GNS 430, Cytec radio stack. I have a CyberPower PC overclocked with an AMD Radeon R9 290, and I know it's old. However, the reason I have this is because this is what most closely replicates what I fly in the real world. And so that's important to me. I only fly GA, and I fly on VATSIM. I try to make it as real as possible. The reason I like A2A is because it requires you to do a pre-flight checklist. And if you're thinking at all of using your sim for training, I absolutely encourage you to go through the process. Don't just hop into the cockpit and start taking off. Go through the process and start thinking about what it is you need to do so that it's totally transferable to the real world. These are the airplanes I've logged. I flew a Flight Design CTLS, Piper Cherokee 140, Cherokee 180, Cessna 152, Cessna 172, a Vans RV-12, a Diamond DA-40, North American T-6 Texan, and the Cirrus SR-22. I flew all of those planes except the SR-22 as a student pilot. This is my dad. This book is dedicated to my dad. He's the one who got me interested in flying. He was not a pilot. I didn't have anyone in my family who was a pilot. I had no one to ask questions to. But my dad always had an interest in learning to fly. So, this Tumac Airport. Tumac Airport was about 4 miles from my house, and I would ride my bicycle there to go watch the airplanes take off. Hang on. It was an intense I had an intense fascination of a youth of 12 years old, and the ability to get into an aircraft and just fly anywhere I thought was amazing. I would ride my little Schwinn bike down, and I would watch the airplanes come in. I would watch the airplanes take off, but I had absolutely no idea what was going on. Some of you may be familiar with this. This is the first simulator that I flew in. My background, as I said, is in IT. And so I started monochrome monitor flying out of Meigs Field. I started flying with my keyboard, like a lot of people did. But I wanted to make it as real as possible. And as you can see, this Max control yoke gives you the real feel of piloting during flight simulation. I would use this, I would connect this up to my PC, I would be able to fly around, and then I would crash when I came into land. So I would try it again, and I would crash when I came into land. PCs got better. I started looking into what's involved with this flying thing. I learned about flaps, didn't know what they were, never heard of them, didn't know how they operated. Got a little bit better. Sims got a little bit better, came color, and I started to understand the principles of what it took to fly. So, I mentioned that I grew up near an airport. I never flew in a small plane until I was almost 40 years old. So the first time I flew in a small plane, that's my partner Barbara. She gave me for my birthday present an introductory flight. I was left seat at the cockpit in the plane, flying the plane with an instructor. And I'd love to tell you, I took to it like a bird to the air. I was white-knuckled the whole time. I'm going to die, and I'm going to kill 2 other people with me. But I didn't, and I learned that I could actually learn to fly an airplane. However, as I mentioned, I had kidney disease. And so I knew inherently that they don't let people with kidney disease become pilots. And I was wrong. So this is how it works, because I get this question all the time. So for those of you who don't know, I have 4 kidneys. I have 2 in the back. I have 1 over here that failed. I have 1 over here that's been working for over 10 years. This is me on my 46th birthday. I was hooked up to the dialysis machine. You can tell that's a happy guy, right? So I was miserable during that whole time. But I never lost my interest in wanting to be able to fly. So I'm going to tell you a little story. Does anybody know who this is? Okay, this is Gene Barry from the Bat Masterson TV show. And right now you're going, what the hell has this got to do with flying? Well, the answer is pretty simple. On Saturday morning, I would get up, because I love Westerns. I would get up, I would watch 2 episodes of Bat Masterson battle all the bad guys, and I did this for about a year and a half. And then the television studio, the channel, changed their production. And now I could buy fat pills or something along those lines, but my television show had gone off the air. So I'm up Saturday morning, 5:45 in the morning, ready to go, coffee in hand, and I had nothing to do. So I remembered my old flight simulator. I went out, I purchased Microsoft Flight Simulator X, FSX. I hooked up my old controller, which didn't work really well anymore. So I bought a new yoke, and I bought pedals, and I bought a radio, and I bought a bunch of stuff. And finally, Barbara says to me, you know, if you're going to spend all this money on fake flying, maybe you ought to try to really fly. And as I said, I didn't know that I could fly. Nevertheless, I looked it up, and in the spring of 2013, I started ground school. And I started going through my ground school. I started learning what I needed to do. I knew that I needed to fly as a person who couldn't probably get a medical, but there's this thing called Sport Pilot, and so I started pursuing that. This is the airplane that I flew in. This is a CTLS, a Flight Design CTLS. Rotax, 914 engine, high wing, flies like a sports car. It was okay as a trainer. I was flying in out of a small grass field in New Hampshire, and this plane wanted to fly. It didn't want to land. And so I had more than 60 hours of flying this plane in the pattern, trying to dial in being able to fly. I also, during that time, took the opportunity. We went to Hawaii. That's where my stepdaughter lives. I booked flying out there, took a lesson, booked that lesson. Got out to the airport, trying to find out how to get in to meet with the flight instructor. Looked around, there was nobody there. There was nobody to tell me what to do. Went in to talk to TSA. TSA said, where are you flying to today? And I said, well, I'm a student pilot. I'm looking for the flight school. And he said, well, it's not here. Get out. So I looked around and looked around. It's getting later. I have a 10 o'clock lesson. I'm waiting and waiting. Don't see any flight instructor. Finally, I reached out to him at about 10 past 10, absolutely certain he's going to be livid that I'm not there. How many have been to Hawaii? So you're familiar with Hawaii time, right? Yeah. He called me and said I should be there in about 10 minutes. So, okay. He arrived, let me know he was there. I went into the terminal. We went out to the plane. And this is a little Cessna 152 that I flew. Nice little plane. We talked about what we were going to do, and I hooked up my GoPro to be able to record this wonderful event. And I turned on my GoPro, and it turned on for about 10 seconds and turned off. I turned it on again, and nothing happened. And I was absolutely certain that I had charged that GoPro the night before. But we had gone to a luau. I won a hula contest. And there may have been a little bit of adult beverage involved. So you have now seen all of the pictures I have from my flight in Hawaii. However, it doesn't matter. If you ever have the opportunity to take a flight lesson in Hawaii, I highly recommend it. It's absolutely gorgeous. And we flew out past Honolulu, down past Makapu'u Lighthouse, back up and across the Pali Pass. And I talk about all of this in my book, and it wouldn't matter that I didn't capture it on camera, because it wouldn't have done it any justice anyway. Absolutely gorgeous. So getting back to my learning to fly, here is what my flight instructor put up for me as flying the pattern. And as you can see, we take off, crab into the wind, climb to 800 feet, continue to crab into the wind, reduce power, come down, trim for 55 knots, and then come in and land. Here's a picture of a flight instructor. He's got a loop-the-loop on his board. Well, I can tell you, the only one doing loops-to-loops was my flight instructor, because I could not get 3 landings in a row. And it didn't matter how many times. Now, none of my landings were unsafe, but he never felt confident in my ability to come in, land soft-failed, over trees on both ends, so it didn't matter which way we came in, 2,100-foot runway in that CTLS. And I tried, and I tried, and I tried, and I couldn't make it work. So, that's not the same CTLS. Looks very much like it. However, this is at another airport, 6,100-foot runway, paved. I soloed in this plane in less than 4 hours. First thing that I want to share with you is be aware of what your situation is and what's going on. And I talk about this in my book. I wrote the book because there is no book that I'm aware of that tells you what it's like to really go through the process of getting your pilot's license. And it's hard. And it's expensive. Using your flight simulator, you can cut out some of that cost. Again, by approaching it real world and talking about it as if this is what I want to do. Find a flight instructor who's willing to work with you on your sim. Prep your lessons, go through your lessons, make sure that you know what you're doing the next time. Maybe fly them in your sim so that you have questions. You can be able to get those questions answered when you meet with your flight instructor. I showed up at my flight school. I had no idea what we were doing that day. Shame on me. I should have insisted to know what we were doing the next time. This is me on my long cross country, coming into land from the CTLS. I was familiar with this airport because when the first airport that I talked about, they decided to pave the grass runway. And so we moved up to this airport. That's how I got 4 airports at 3 flight schools. And so here I am coming into land. But that airplane that I was flying developed engine trouble. They took it offline. They didn't have another light sport plane where I had been flying. So I went back to the first flight school that I went to. My flight instructor at the first flight school still wouldn't solo me there. Now, this is obviously not a CTLS. This is an RV-12. This is my 3rd airplane that I flew. It's an RV-12. It was factory built. It was brand new, beautiful plane. I don't know if any of you are familiar with a cast-ring nose wheel. So, narrow taxiways. I taxied this plane like a drunken sailor. I could not make this plane go straight up that taxiway, and all the time my flight instructor's yelling in my headset, you're overcorrecting, you're overcorrecting. I just couldn't get the hang of it. Didn't matter, because this plane and the original CTLS, I flew for about 4 weeks when the owner of the planes, who was leasing them back to the flight school, got mad at the flight school, took his planes and went home. So I had over almost 75 hours in, and I had no plane to fly. However, Basic Med had come in. Are you familiar with Basic Med? Is anyone not familiar with Basic Med? Cool. So Basic Med had come in. I just needed to get a special issuance for my kidney transplants, which I did, and then I started flying on Basic Med. That allowed me to transfer from going and working on my sport pilot to working on my private. So what did that mean? It basically meant I didn't need to fully start over, but now I had to get more time. I had a different airplane, different pieces that I needed to go to through instrument training. This is airplane number 4. This is a 1967 Piper Cherokee. I was 3 years old when this plane was built. So I went from flying a plane that was basically brand new to flying a plane that was almost as old as I was. Welcome to private pilot training. So up in the Northeast where I fly, every year on Lake Winnipesaukee in New Hampshire, when the ice comes in, they turn the seaplane base into an ice runway. It's the only certified ice runway in the lower 48 states. This is at Alton Bay in New Hampshire. And I had planned to go there with my flight instructor in that Cherokee. We were all set to go, and the day before, it got warm. The ice started to melt, and they canceled they closed the airport, and I haven't been there yet. It's still on my list of things to do, and I will fly there. I just haven't yet. However, the following summer, I did fly to Keene on my own, 4th of July. This is a lesson. I decided I was going to go get breakfast, rented the plane, flew up, not a long flight, maybe 40 minutes, landed, got out of the plane, and it looked fairly desolate because I hadn't planned. I hadn't checked, I hadn't looked, hadn't talked to anybody. Not only was the restaurant not open, but the terminal wasn't open, and I didn't bring water. As a matter of fact, I didn't bring anything because I was all going to get something to eat and get water and get all prepped. So I got back into the plane, took off, was sure that I was heading towards the airport. I had a VOR in the plane, no GPS. I had a VOR in the plane. Didn't bother to put in the VOR because I knew where I was going. And I could see the airport that was my waypoint. I had flight following. Air traffic control comes on, something like Cherokee, November 1234. Are you still heading to the destination that you plan to go to? I was like, yes, sir, I am. Well, then maybe you want to turn to 90 degrees. Because where I was going, I was heading into Massachusetts in the western part of the state. I had identified an airport that I thought was my waypoint. Because you know what? From the sky, they all look the same. Single runway, like there it is. So, another recommendation, if you are going to fly, even in VATSIM, and you're going to fly GA, I highly recommend you get flight following. Absolutely 100%. So, I went to Oshkosh. I went in 2016, 2017, 2018. It's an amazing event. Has anybody here been to Oshkosh? Yeah, it's just unbelievable. 2017, I got to meet one of my heroes. For those of you who don't know, that is Stan Lee. He worked with EAA. They produced a character, a superhero, named Aviaire, and he was introduced during that. On Sunday morning, I went out to the airfield, get some pictures. I was fortunate enough to watch the aeroshell team start to get themselves prepped to take off, fly in formation. Just absolutely amazing. I didn't think that I was ever going to be able to fly at that level, and I still don't. They're just incredible, incredible pilots. However, I also am interested in seaplanes. So up in Moosehead Lake in Maine is one of the big seaplane events. It's called the Moosehead Fly-In. For Christmas, the previous year, Barbara had given me, as a Christmas present, that trip. So I got to go to the seaplane fly-in for the whole weekend. It was all paid for. However, that's in September. Christmas is in December. I had to wait from December through September to get my Christmas present. But I have to tell you, am I the most fortunate guy to have someone who will give me that kind of a Christmas present? Amen. I am blessed. So, while I was in Hawaii the second time, I learned that the Cherokee had developed engine trouble, and it was being taken offline. They didn't have another Cherokee at the flight school. So, let me introduce you to airplane number 5. This is with flight instructor number 3. And so, this doesn't look like a Cherokee. For those of you who don't know, this is a Cessna 172. It's fuel injected. It's a little bit different than the Cherokee. I was not very good at flying this plane because I also knew that at the end of the year, I worked for a school department. I was the IT director. I also knew that I was going to lose my job. And it was nothing that I did particularly, except that there was a change in superintendents. He had a different idea about what should be happening at the school department. The very first time I met him, after working there for almost 17 years, he told me, "I don't think you're the right person for the job." I went, "I created the job that's here. There was nobody here before me." "Yeah, but I just don't think you're a good fit." So I knew that I was going to get canned, basically. I realized that are you familiar with the I'm safe profile? So what I'm safe is it's sort of a self-checklist. And it goes like this. It's broken down: illness, medicine, stress, alcohol, fatigue, and emotion. All right? And I do this all the time, make sure that I'm safe to fly. Well, at the end of February, beginning of March, in 2018, I was stressed, I was fatigued, and I was an emotional wreck. That's 3 checks. So I grounded myself. And I grounded myself basically until I could get recharged. So I went back to Oshkosh that year. I got to ride in that Mustang that's there. I don't know if you're familiar with this, but Ford named their Mustang after the P-51. That's where they got the name from, because it was a very popular airplane. And this was sliding around on a slick track around the around inside of Oshkosh. But my birthday is in July. It actually falls every year during Oshkosh. And so as a birthday present, I gave myself a ride in a T6 Texan. If you're not sure how to elevate your spirit, take a ride in a Warbird, because that will definitely do it. Here I am at the controls. I have 20 minutes logged time in a warbird as a student pilot. It was absolutely phenomenal. I knew when I came back I was going to have to do something. Let me introduce you to Juliana. This is the sixth airplane that I flew. It's Piper Cherokee 140. The name Juliana comes from, it was not its nickname. I won't go into what its nickname was, but it's a song that, sea shanty. I sang sea shanties in Gloucester with a group for a little while. And one of the people that I sang with sang a song about London Julie. It was about a sailor who had a love of his life named Julie, and Juliana, and he was head over heels for this woman. However, she wasn't quite so interested in him, and the sea shanty goes on to talk about when he comes back from sea, he learns that she is on the knee of a sailor. So I picked the name for this particular plane because although I never really fell entirely in love with it, I sure spent a lot of money on her. And I flew and I went and got breakfast. And I had a great time. This was my first solo in this plane. I flew up to southern Maine. This is a radio stack that's in the plane. It's a GNS 430. See the bottom Bendix King? That this part here, well, it's on 119.20 because that's the ATIS for the airfield that I flew in. The inner knob didn't work so good. And so you could change it, but it wouldn't necessarily change the frequency. Or it might change the frequency, but it wouldn't represent what frequency it was on. So we just left it on that. So coming back, I didn't know. This is the first time I'd ever flown with a GPS, right? So I'm flying along. I can't get the GPS to connect, but not a big deal, right? Because I'm flying on the East Coast, right? If you're flying north, big water on the right. If you're flying back, big water on the left. It's pretty tough to get lost. However, the thing I didn't take into account is that the radio, the primary radio, is also in that GNS 430. So it was working fine as I was going up, but I'm coming back and now, and I can't hardly hear what's going on. Now, I was able to get clearance to land. I was able to get that through. It was still static, it was tough. So now here I am, cleared to land, but I can't hear anything the tower says anymore. Now I have to make a decision, right? Do I declare an emergency? Can they even hear me? Well, I'm cleared to land. So I'm going, well, okay, I guess we're going to land. This isn't going to be a go-around because I can't tell them that I'm going around. So I put it in and we landed. Turns out they'd done a little work on the radio. They forgot to tighten it all the way in. It wasn't fully seated. So I was annoyed to learn that, but not as annoyed as my flight instructor, who flew it 50 miles away to the avionics shop, who then just tightened the little screws and said, "You're all set." So this is me. This is a picture, as I mentioned, big water on the left. I talk a little bit about wings. Now, is anyone here familiar with the wings program from the FAA? Does anybody know how it works? Can you explain it to me? Because I still can't get it. I mean, I go through all of the stuff that I'm supposed to do, and I know that I'm eventually supposed to be able to be able to recertify. I can't figure it out. And I've talked to the FAA, and they've explained it to me about 4 or 5 times. I still don't get it. However, this is my flight instructor. I asked him to come talk to the EA chapter to try to straighten this out. I still don't quite get it. But if you're, I encourage you to participate. Yes, sir.
I think how it works, and I talked to my flight instructor about this, because he said we need every 2 years, 24 months, right, to get your currency, you need 1 hour of ground and then 1 hour of flight. That's the bare minimum for it. So the wings program allows you to do that stuff online, so you can just focus on that.
So what this gentleman was saying is that, yes, you need time in ground and you need time in the air. And I believe it's three groups to be able to do that. But trying to figure that out and how to get that time, that's sort of the mystery, and it's a little bit tough. The website is not very intuitive. However, I do encourage you to look at Fast Team and be able to look up Fast Team seminars. Those are typically included for getting wings credit, and at least get started in the program if you're interested at all about becoming a real world pilot. And you don't have to be a pilot to sign up. So one of the other things, I'm involved with the Massachusetts Air and Space Museum. They accepted a donation of 2 SR-22 simulators. Because I'm the tech guy, I get assigned to make them work. I was told, well, they were working when we stopped using them about 4 years ago. I went, okay. But we're going to see if we can get them out and so forth. I will say, I took the 2 of them. I did get one of them working. It's still at my flight school. They have an SR-22, Cirrus. They use this to test to make sure that the real world pilots who are flying get checked out in this before they go out and are rented the Cirrus. In December of 2019, no, it was before that. It was December anyway. We went to a rocket launch. Has anybody here ever been to a rocket launch? Very cool. I hadn't been. Barbara hadn't been. We decided we were going to do that for our winter vacation. Get out of New England, head down to Florida. So we were sitting, waiting for the launch to happen, and the clock down here gets down to minus 15 and stops. It's like, okay, what does that mean? And sits there and sits there and sits there. Eventually, a nice gentleman came out and said, yep, mission scrubbed for today. Okay. But we're going to try again tomorrow. So we come back the next day. We're standing outside, waiting to get in, like 5:45 in the morning. Gentleman comes out and says, yep, mission is scrubbed. And we're going, yeah, we know this was a scrub mission. That's why we're here today. No. We just learned that today's mission is scrubbed. So it was 2 days. We were there for 3 days. I said, you know what? I'm not getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, the 3rd day of my vacation, to go watch a flight that probably won't go up. And sure enough, it didn't. So we watched basically the day before Christmas in our pajamas from the living room, NASA TV, and watched the flight go up. So, mock check ride. Anybody know what a mock check ride is? Yes, sir. Yes, sir. What's a mock check ride?
Your CFI or another CFI will basically pretend to be the examiner, and you go through the gamut of the test.
That's correct. So, I make a little fun of the word mock. But yes, a mock check ride is where you go through all of the procedures as if you were going to take your real check ride. Now, my flight instructor, I did 4 mock check rides with my flight instructor. And he told me as soon as we sat down, I am not going to tell you how to do anything. I'm just going to tell you what I need you to do, and you're going to do it. But he couldn't do that. Oh, yeah, no, that was a good term, but you might want to do this a little bit more. Maybe you want to put a little bit more rudder in, maybe. And I'm going, that's great, but it's not helping. Because I need someone who could say to me, you did that wrong and you failed. They're not supposed to teach. So, I eventually got a CFI who I'd never sat with before, and he put me through a mock check ride. This guy was tough. I can tell you he was tough. He flew for Delta, and he told me that you need to make 90-degree turns in the pattern. I expect to see that, and that's what you're going to do. So, 90-degree turns. So we go up in the air and we're flying around, and he has me under the foggles. And what foggles are, for those who don't know, it basically means that you can't see here, you can only see out of the bottom part. So I'm in simulated instrument conditions. And he has me dial in the VOR, and I'm flying to the VOR, and I'm holding my altitude, and I'm holding my heading, and I'm doing all those things. And he said, no, that's great. Why don't you turn 180 degrees and put the plane in a stall? I'm going, I've never done a stall in instrument conditions. So he says, you do know how to do a stall, right? I went, yeah. Well, just do that. Well, I can tell you, it was the best stall I ever did, because I wasn't focused on what was happening outside. I could only focus on the instruments. It was I don't think that airplane came down 70 feet when I put it in a stall. And I was, I was up at the margins before, 180 feet and so forth. So absolutely incredible. We came into land, and the flight instructor, his name was Gil in the book. We come down. He has me do a crosswind landing, a crab in, come down, and he says to me, well, if I could give you your ticket, I'd write you your ticket today, but I can't. So I went for my check ride. The last 3 chapters are about my check ride. So I can tell you that it is real world, exactly what happened to me. I had to take my check ride 3 times. I won't go into details because you have to read the book, but there's reasons for that. One of them was weather. And I eventually was able to pass my private. Thank you for coming. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
You mentioned basic med before.
Yeah, basic med.
Right, so that still requires you to get 1/3 class medical.
That's correct. You have to get 1/3 class medical.
So so I'm just wondering why you decided to do sport pilot first.
Because basic med didn't exist when I first started.
No, but you still would. But you still would have had to have a 3rd class medical anyway, right? If you were to try to do a PPL.
Yeah. So sport pilot, you could fly in your driver's license.
Right.
That's it. You
Yeah.
just so if I wanted to go for my PPL, yes, I didn't intend to. So I was happy with the restrictions of a sport pilot. Basically, that means you can fly 1 passenger. The problem is there's a weight limit for sport pilot, and there's just not a lot of planes around. So that's what the problem is with sport pilot. You can't fly at night. There's restrictions. You can't fly above 10,000 feet. But I didn't care about that. I just wanted to fly. Questions? Well, in the back. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Could you talk about the special issuance process? For you?
Sure, I'll talk about that in just a second. What's your question? That was my question. Okay, so special issuance. So if you're dealing with medical issues, talk to your doctor, your regular doctor. Don't go to the AME. Talk to your regular doctor about what it is you want to do. And if your regular doctor, the one that you see the most, who is treating you for whatever you have, agrees that you're okay to be a pilot, and maybe share with them the basic med stuff, then when you go to an AME, be right up front with them. I have this condition. I've already talked to my physician. My physician thinks that I'm okay to be able to fly, and I would like for you two to connect and chat. That's what I did. I had my nephrologist, kidney doctor, reach out to the AME that I was going to. I didn't know this AME. He didn't know who I was. But my nephrologist, I had been working with since he was a resident. And so he knew me back and forth. He knew what my history was. He knew all of the medications I was on. He knew everything that I was doing. So when I got to the AME, I had to go through the physical, just like everyone else does. But there was no surprises. He already had all of my medical information from my nephrologist about what to expect. And so I was there. I did the things that I needed to do. It took a little while. It took me about 8 weeks before I got my special issuance. And under my special issuance, I needed to renew every year. But that didn't matter because I switched to basic med, which worked for me because, quite frankly, I see 4 doctors a year, and none of them are an AME. So they know more about my medical condition than any guy who's going through. So that's my recommendation. How are we doing time-wise? So we're just, yep. Do we have time for one more? Okay.
Another quick recommendation for anybody considering private. No. One quick recommendation for anyone considering private. If you're denied your third-class medical, you can't get basic med, okay? My suggestion is, having been denied a third-class medical from the FAA and fighting to get it, do a mock medical with an AME. Pay them for their time, and then you'll find out from them directly if you'll pass or if you'll fail. Now, this mock medical isn't permanent. This is just you knowing whether or not you can get that medical before you're denied that medical. Take that from personal experience.
Great advice. So that's it. Again, thank you, everybody. I appreciate it. Enjoy the rest of the show. I have books available. I'm going to be out in the hallway. I'll be able to sign them. They're $15 a piece. And thanks again.